Is the recording on? Yes. View. Okay, let's go. Great. We will start in 1 or 2 minutes to let people join if you're ready. And welcome everyone. Okay, I think we can start. Welcome everyone. My name is Isabelle Lefebvre-Vary, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Fertility Friends Foundation. I'm gonna host the webinar tonight, and I have a few housekeeping notes first. Please keep your mic off as well as your camera during the entire webinar. This webinar is recorded and we are going to post it on our YouTube channel afterwards. So it's better for confidentiality and anonymity reasons that you stay off video and mics. You can ask questions if you'd like through the chat throughout the webinar. And Emily will answer them as well as Michelle during the webinar, but there will be also a Q&A session at the end and where you can ask all your questions you want through the chat. So maybe a few words about Fertility Friends Foundation. Fertility Friends Foundation is a Canadian registered charity that offers grants to cover expenses associated with fertility treatments, IVF, that can include egg and sperm donations, and gestational surrogacy. We started our work 4 years ago, and we gave over $450,000 in grants to individuals and couples who would not have been able to start or continue their fertility journey without our financial support. As part of our mission, we also have an educational component, which is why we're organizing this webinar tonight as part of Your Fertility Guide webinar series that offers webinars every month on various topics related to fertility. And tonight, the topic is choosing egg donations, legal realities, and emotional journey. We chose this topic knowing that it is a sensitive one and a topic that is not spoken about enough. And we thought that we could bring value there by shedding lights on egg donation. We are very lucky and grateful for our two speakers tonight. The first one is Michelle Flowerday. Michelle is very dear to Fertility Friends Foundation. She's one of our board members, and she's been actually a board member since the foundation started, so it's been 4 years now. But on a daily life, she is a fertility lawyer, and she founded Plaid Fertility Law and Flowerday Fertility Law. And tonight she will talk about the legal aspects of egg donation. Thank you very much, Michelle, for joining us. Emily Getz, also a known figure on our channels, a very good friend of Fertility Friends Foundation, member of our advisory committee, co-host of Night One, which I hope you all attended, but also the founder of Day One Fertility and the Day One podcast. And tonight she's with us because she's going to talk about her own experience and her own fertility journey with egg donation. So thank you so much, Emily, for being with us and sharing your experience with it. And I think that we will start with you, Emily, with more of the experience aspect and the emotional aspect of egg donation. And I'll start with one maybe question, which is, can you take us back to the moment egg donation became part of your story?
Sure. Well, first I just want to say thank you for having me and to say this is like my first time really talking about it in depth within the community. So I'm grateful for this conversation today. And if anyone has any questions while I talk, feel free to just go in the chat. Um, but for those that don't know, like a very, very Cole's notes about our journey is that we actually have a biological son. Um, he's going to be 9, and we got pregnant very quickly with him. And so I think you enter egg donation from so many different um vantage points, uh and like any, I think, intervention, you're entering from different points. So I think it's important for you to know like where I entered egg donation and how I entered it, because you know that's part of the emotional piece, I think. Because some people enter it like knowing from the very beginning this is how they're going to build their family, and so their process getting there is extremely different. So I just wanted to ensure I was saying my entry point to it comes from a place of um, trying really hard for about 5 years with my own eggs. So we did like 4 rounds of IVF. I've had multiple miscarriages, multiple clinics, and egg donation was a conversation as I got older, and also as things were not, I was not getting the results that I wanted. And from the technology we have today, which isn't that great with knowing egg quality, but you're able to get some data points. It was always pointing to like my fragile and low quality eggs, which you can argue a lot of maybe doctors like to say that that is sort of a problem with conception or with building your family, is this egg quality conversation. But I was feeling like it was making sense. And so the conversation of egg donation probably happened 2 years before I, excuse me, like actually decided it might be a route that we have to go down. It took me a really long time to cut the acceptance of it. So I would say that like maybe 3 years ago, it was just like a conversation that was put on the table. And then I would say 2024, beginning of 2024 is when I started to really dive into like what that was going to look like. And I will say that until she came out, I was still accepting that, like, I was still struggling with accepting that this was sort of how we were going to build the family. I had a lot of anxiety and fear and nervousness about doing it. I think because of where I come from, which is that I had a biological son, so I really only saw my family through that lens. Um, and it was hard for me to understand if the connection for me was going to be there. And I was really fortunate, and I think this is why these conversations are really important, to have some really good people around me that had a family because of sperm or egg donation, and leaning on their stories and leaning on their connections with their children to kind of get me through. So that is like a very high level overview of sort of how the first time that I really started to say this might be something we have to do. It wasn't,
Do
it
you
wasn't, it
remember?
wasn't fun. What?
Yeah. Do you remember the emotions and reactions that you got the first time you realized that egg donation might be a solution for you and something you would maybe
Yeah.
consider?
Um, well, I was trying for 5 years and we had a lot of miscarriage and a lot of failure. I don't want to say failure, but we weren't getting the results that we wanted. And I turned 39 and I was and I was just like out with Evan for my birthday with a couple cocktails deep and basically it was like I just there was like a breaking point of like I can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. Like it's not working. And I really was ready to get out of the spin of IVF. Um, and Evan, my husband was very into donation. Like he would have done it a long before me. It took me more time, and I think sometimes when it's your genetics that you have to grieve, it's harder. Um, and I also had doctors be like, it's not that you can't. It's not that like there's a still a possibility. It's just so low. And I was at a breaking point of like, I need to try something new. I just need to do that, even though it's really hard. Like me and Evan were trying with my own eggs, like we did IUIs, we tried at home like right until the transfer. Like right up until the month before the transfer, we were still trying. I was so the best analogy I can give you, which like is my favorite way to talk about fertility in general, is like for years and years and years, I was trying to get water from this one fountain. And I would only drink water from this one fountain. And I waited and I waited and I was getting dehydrated and I was like dying. I was really like malleable. And I was so determined that one day water was going to come out of this one faucet. And finally, I got to like such a bad place emotionally and physically and mentally that I was like, screw it. I'm just gonna open. Like all of a sudden, I pulled back and I was like, oh, there's all these other, faucets that could provide me with water. And then I could drink water and then I could move on with my life. And so I just opened up a lot of different faucets and I was like, I will drink wherever this water comes from because I just like I'm done basically. Not saying that I wanted that.
Mm.
Like we did adoption courses. And when we started to look through egg donation, things were happening much faster than we were used to in my own journey. So I was just kind of going with that. But like in tandem with anxiety and fear, and the whole time it was like it kind of felt like I was kicking and screaming like to the end.
What was the hardest part for you in that decision?
Uh, I think I think the like failure and quitting and like stopping idea, because I think in fertility, it's like very fertility treatment can be like very addictive because there's always a chance, there's always a possibility that you can do it. And so you're fighting your way to that possibility. So it's sort of closing a chapter that still might give you what you want. And I think it feels like not natural to do that because you've been doing it for so long. Um, so I think there was like fear of like, I'm gonna go down a path that I don't really want to do. And maybe if I did one more, I would like get to do it with my own eggs. I think like figuring out how do I move forward while being scared that like I'm making all these wrong choices. And if I did it one more time, I was always like one more time and one more time. Um, and then I think on the truth is the connection. Like I was really scared that like, and I'll just say this like super vulnerable on this call, like that I just like wasn't gonna love her as much as I love Ryder. That would like that was really hard for me. I couldn't understand love outside of my own biology. And I will say this isn't excuse me, this isn't common. Like or it's common, but like again, I think I just want everyone to understand like where I was coming from was a place of like I had a biological son. I was doing things, interventions. I had a late term loss. Like I was very close to doing this with my own eggs. So my fear of like love, I think was really the my biggest like anxiety. But again, I had like unbelievable people that like let me call them and cry to them and like say all my fears to them. And they would be like, you don't understand. They're going to hand you the baby. It won't matter. Like, keep going. So, like, I truly would not be where I am today. And I wouldn't be on this side without, I think, keep trusting like that it's going to work out.
It does make sense. There's something you said at the beginning about the worst aspect of things was for you to not hang on the hope that you had anymore about having a child with your own genetics, but to give up on this hope to just go into this path that you've never thought of before. You never thought that it would be yours, and yet it was yours. And that goes back, I think, to how did you grieve? Because I think, I haven't been through egg donation myself, but when I try to put myself in your shoes, not expecting one day to use egg donations to grow your family, I'm thinking that there is a grieving part in that,
Yeah. Yeah.
grieving of having a biological child. For you,
Yeah.
how did you deal with that?
Um, I think like grief looks so different in depending on like so many different ways, just different things. Like I think I have a very good friend of mine who said to me, there's grief in like both sides of the decisions. There's grief if you stop. There's grief if you try donation. There's grief if you keep going in your IVF journey. Like you might have to live with grief, a version of grief like forever. And it's sort of picking which one you're okay to try to live with. Um, and you've gone through already, like when I would work with members in my membership or clients, like I would always say, you have evidence of going through something like your worst nightmare has already happened and you got through it. You have evidence of like something very hard happening to you and you moving through it. And so I had a lot of evidence of bad things happening in terms of our family building. But I had evidence of good things happening. And I think I don't think I wasn't like, okay, I'm gonna grieve, and then one day the grief's gonna be over, and then I'm gonna get to move on. It's just, I think I'll always have a version of grief inside of me from this 10 years of us
Mm.
growing our family. And like I kind of have accepted that and the belief that like something beautiful will be on the other side was starting to even out the grief. And I also think when you've been in fertility treatment that hasn't been working, and then you switch paths and you're starting to get results that are, we were like making more like I barely made embryo. So like we were getting these results through egg donation for the first time. So there was like a momentum that so
Mm.
it sort of started to like it like ebbed and flowed, but there was starting to be movement. And I think I was so stuck and I didn't see any good results for years and years and years that like I was like, okay, I'm still not wanting to do it, but it seems like this is like the path of least resistance, and like I'll take that right now. But it doesn't go away. The trust of just, I don't know, this belief that like I'll figure it out kind of allowed me to like deal with it.
Mm. I, I'm, I get it. Like it's not at some point that it's gonna be resolved. It just it keeps going on. But like the next question I think is like a continuity. How do you feel about your family today? Like,
Oh, yeah. I mean, like now it's like I don't even know that version of me. I feel like a butterfly. Like my skin shed and like I turned into a butterfly, Like um I feel like Andy, my daughter, who just turned one like last week, is I say to her all the time, like, I'm like, you redefined, like, I'll get emotional about this. Like, she redefined how I felt like my capability of love was. Like, I think without egg donation, I was like, I can only love this one linear way. And she has like opened my eyes to the fact that like I never think about her conception. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, how'd you get that? But like it just doesn't, I don't care. And no one can no like it when they hand you like a newborn baby, it just doesn't compute. Like as soon I had anxiety to the second they took her out. I was like, I don't think this is gonna work. I don't think this is gonna work. I had such bad like crippling anxiety. I barely could work really during the pregnancy out of fear. As soon as she came out, I was like, I love her so much. Like it was just this, it feels like I transferred over like through the portal almost like to this other side. I think now I just have like I just want her to be okay with her story and like that the fears are more just around like how is she going to navigate this herself. Um, but I wouldn't give her back if you told me that I could like have a baby with my own genetics and you wouldn't get her like no way. And then I'll say one other thing that's like kind of woo-woo. So like it depends kind of where you are if you're ready to hear something or you care to hear this. But um, I had a coach that I worked with for a while, and her when Andy was born, she had this thought of like it's super woo-woo, so just like go with me on this. But that there's like souls that are circling your family and they're just waiting for like a physical vessel to like come into your family through. And she sort of was saying like the and souls don't have genders, so it doesn't matter, it's a boy or girl. But my belief is that like Andy's soul was like waiting for like years. They're like, she was like, come on, girl, like get it together already. And the donor is just a material that allowed me to like get a physical, healthy baby earth side. So like her soul could like come into our family. Like Andy was like meant for us. Um, and I don't even like I think it's cool now. I'm just like, it's so cool that I love you. I didn't think it was possible for me. So she's like expanded my viewpoint on what lo like defining real love, which I think is so cool.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. It's heartwarming to know about your beautiful family and
Thanks.
you being so open to talk about it and so happy. So thank you so much,
You're
Emily,
welcome.
for sharing all of
You're
that.
welcome.
But Michelle, I think it's going to be your turn to talk about more the legal aspects of egg donation. Um, because once someone decides to move forward with egg donation, there is a legal side about it that shouldn't be ignored because it's a very important side. So maybe you can walk us through the different steps involved, legal steps involved in egg donation in Canada.
Absolutely. First of all, Isabel, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here. And Emily, oh my gosh, you had me. Honestly, your story is really beautiful and you share it so in such a touching way. So thank you for that. It was really wonderful to hear. Okay, the legal stuff. It actually is a continuation of the emotional stuff too. It's not like the emotional stuff comes to an end and then we embark on the legal. It's all so intertwined, I think. So we've got a legal process that will allow the medical process to continue. So once you have a medically cleared donor, you start to think about the legals. You don't really want to embark on the legal stuff until your donor is medically cleared because you don't want to expend all of those resources on a process that may not you may not complete. So once your donor has, you've been given the go ahead, you'll start on the OVA donation agreement. The good news about building your family through OVA donation when it comes to the legals is if you or your partner is delivering your child, this is the only formal legal step that you need to consider. When you're building your family with surrogacy, there's more legal steps uh, because somebody other than a parent delivered your child. But when a parent delivers the child, we only need an OVA donation agreement. So in terms of the process of OVA donation, a couple of things. We're looking at two different levels of legislation that we need to contemplate. Okay, at the federal level, we have the Assisted Human Reproduction Act. That's the legislation that deals with finances. So my mnemonic strategy is federal finances. It's a really robust piece of legislation. It has a whole bunch of important provisions to it, including consent and things you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. But for this conversation, I think the most important thing to know is that you cannot pay or compensate your donor. You're permitted to reimburse their reasonable out-of-pocket expenses related to the donation. There's a list of what those expenses can be under the reimbursement regulations, but to give you a sense, it can be legal fees, the cost of independent legal advice. We'll talk about that in a second. It can be counseling, it can be wellness, it can be child care, pet care, lost wages. There's a list of expenses you can reimburse your donor so that they're not out of pocket. So it should be a financially neutral endeavor for your donor. They can't make money, but they certainly should not be out of pocket for helping you build your family. So that's at the federal level. Down at the provincial level, my mnemonic strategy continues. So I think provincial parentage, every province across the country has legislation that sets out, how you define parent, how you define donor, how you become a parent when you're working to build your family through third-party reproduction, and that's at the provincial level all across the country. So we think about the legislation that's involved as we move into the process of putting the OVA donation agreement into place. A couple of things before you start is both sides do need to have their own independent legal advice. It's not written anywhere in the law, but it's absolutely the standard of practice, particularly in a known donation. I think people think, oh, well, we know each other, or we're best friends, or we're family, so we're just going to talk it out. We don't need an OVA donation agreement. It's really important that there's an agreement in place and that both sides have independent legal advice, certainly. It's important that both parties have their own lawyer who is not conflicted in any way, explaining the agreement, walking them through it, making sure that they understand, that they can ask questions, make revisions, negotiate certain really important things, and that when the final agreement is reached and signed, that it really does capture what everyone's intentions are, okay? So an agreement is drafted. Typically by one side starts to draft the agreement. It's often the intended parents who start with the draft. They get comfortable with it. They'll then send it over to the lawyer for the donor. They'll review it, come back, possibly ask for changes. They'll negotiate, the agreement is signed. And then the final step, what your fertility clinic is waiting for, is what's called the legal clearance letter. This is a letter that lets the clinic know there's an agreement in place. The parties had independent legal advice, it's signed, and they can safely move on with the process of the retrieval and making embryos.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you very much. What are the legal difference between using a known donor or an anonymous donor? Are there any differences?
There's no legal difference. So in both situations, a donor is waiving property rights in the ova from the moment of the retrieval, property rights in any embryos that are created. A donor is waiving parental rights in any child or children that are born into the future. And of course, intended parents are assuming those property rights and assuming the parental rights. So from a legal perspective, there isn't a fundamental difference in terms of parties' rights and what parentage looks like. I think there's an important difference in terms of the experience of the parties, the best interest of a child. I do a lot of reading and I'm very interested in this subject matter. And I think the current thinking today, as long as the circumstances are right, is that known donation. Most people are building their family now with known donation, thinking about best interests of children. And you can listen to a lot of donor conceived people talk about the benefits of having access or information about the person who helped, their conception, and how people feel when they didn't know about it. So from a legal perspective, it's very similar, but from a donor conceived child perspective, I think it's quite different.
Thank you. What are the protections and the rights that intended parents should be aware of going into a legal agreement for ova donations?
So the agreement will cover a whole bunch of important elements to the relationship, both prior to the retrieval, at the time of the retrieval, the circumstances right around it, and then into the future. So if we think about it sort of chronologically, I guess, in terms of the pre-retrieval, of course, it's going to have a section about conduct of the donor, things that they can do and not do so that it's the best possible result, both for the donor in terms of a safe retrieval and for intended parents in terms of quality and quantity of eggs. So there's things around, safe sex and toxic substances that are really important to consider. And then around at the time of the retrieval, there's provisions that deal with the donor strictly following the medical protocol of the fertility clinic. There's discussions around confidentiality. The parties can certainly, typically an agreement will say that the parties can share the family building project or how conception happened on social media. They can't tag the other party without consent, that sort of thing. So we talk about who's going to know both publicly and privately in terms of family and friends, future contact between the child and the donor, what that looks like, what's the minimum age that a child can reach out to the donor, how is that reach out going to happen, whether or not there's updates that are going to be expected between the parties. Some of this is enforceable, some of it is not, honestly, but sometimes parties want to include this stuff in the agreement so they can move into the family building project with the assurances that how they think about the future relationship, that there's mutual agreement, that everyone's turned their minds to the difficult issues.
Yeah, I see. So every aspect actually of the donation is in the agreement to protect the intending parents and the future child, I guess.
Yeah, and then certainly the donor. I mean, there's a couple of other provisions that are included in an agreement that I think are important. One of them is a reciprocal exchange of birth information. We don't have a donor sibling registry in Canada the way they do in the United States. And so sometimes donations happen in a geographically close proximity. Sometimes they don't, but stranger things have happened. And what we always want to be careful is that we don't create issues of consanguinity, right? So we want donor conceived children to have a sense of where any genetically related people are out there in the world. So we have a reciprocal exchange of information, both on the donor side and the intended parent side, in terms of children who might be genetically related to each other. And then we also include a positive obligation, mostly on the donor and on the intended parents in terms of the child, but to come forward with any medical information that may be learned at a later date that has a genetic or inheritable component to it, to proactively share it for the best interest of the child in case there's a prophylactic decision that needs to be made to protect the child in terms of health and well-being. So yeah, it protects everybody, including the child, including the donor.
And any mistakes or misconceptions that you see that you feel people watching this webinar or listening now or watching later should be aware of?
I think there's a misconception around the need for an agreement. Sometimes I have fertility clinics reach out to me and say, we're not going to insist that an agreement be put into place. We just want you to have a phone conversation with the donor and make sure that they understand, what their rights are. I really fundamentally disagree with that, both from a legal protection perspective. For instance, in Ontario, we can have up to four legal parents on a birth certificate. Two dads, two moms, three dads, one mom. It could, family formation happens in a whole bunch of different ways. One of the ways that we protect parents and donors and we make sure that intentions are captured is through this legal agreement so that everyone understands who intends to be the parent and who doesn't. And if there's ever a dispute about who a child's parents are, the first thing a court would look to is, well, what did the parties intend at the time of conception? So from a legal perspective, the agreement protects who the parents are. So it's so important to have that. And then the legal agreement and the legal process, I mean, it's a very emotional part of the process. And, Emily, you can speak to this too about how you felt perhaps in the legal process, but it really does initiate a whole bunch of things that people have to think about, conversations that they have to have and face about how they feel about their child potentially meeting a donor or having communication with a donor in the future, and are they going to tell their family and friends, and who, what are the circumstances under which they're going to share the information with their child. So I think the legal agreement piece does capture and ensure that a whole bunch of the emotional conversations are had as well, that they're not denied or ignored, that people deal with them kind of head on.
Actually, you asked Emily, and I think it's a good question for you, Emily. What do you think about that specific aspect of the legal aspect of things? How did you live through that? And yeah, what would you recommend to people following your
In terms
experience?
of
The legal aspect of things, like did it bring some relief to you to have a legal agreement in place? Did you feel safer with a legal agreement in place? What was your...
Yeah, our situation's slightly different in the sense that we actually did ours through the states.
Uh-huh.
Um, and ours was frozen eggs. So it made the legal, Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that, well, I'm sure the states obviously isn't in the donate domain as much, but I think when you're doing frozen, there's things that are like kind of in place faster, it was felt like. We actually tried fresh at the beginning, but it didn't work out. So this we actually went through a failed donor round. Yeah, and but I will say that our donor is unknown. Like we don't know her, which is like, as Michelle kind of pointed out, I think we're moving away from that in society. This idea of, I think there's three buckets actually. There's like anonymous, which is like you can have a donor, and then your child, like, you don't know anything about the donor. This actually happens in the UK more, and they are really putting an end to this idea of like, you don't even know what they look like. Like there's agencies that basically you tell them what you want, they match you, but you don't have any information about that donor. You're like fully blind. That's kind of like level one. Level two, which is like the you have a history, profile on them, like Tinder. It's really like Tinder. It's kind of we can talk about that, but the process of picking donors, I think, to me, that was more emotional than the legal side. It was like the picking of them. But like you can see their profile, you learn their history. For us, we had like a video. We saw photos of like her from a baby all the way until she was in her 20s. And then at 18, it's like unlocked that like you can contact them. Um, and then there's like the top, which is like a very known donor where you can actually like get on a Zoom with them and like meet them. And you guys have a way, I think that from a legal perspective is probably your most like back and forth, right? Because that person is super involved. Um, or you have what we have, which is like I have all of her information. I've seen her profile of the videos, da da da. But like she's requested to stay anonymous, like air quote forever. Now, the agency we worked with was like, there is no anonymous. Like you can do 23andMe, you can like look on Facebook, like you could find this person if you wanted to. And there's a lot of different reasons we decided to go in that way. Also something that gave me like major panic attacks because I didn't really do my research into like the impact that might have about like I basically got pregnant with her and then was like, holy shit, did I like screw this whole thing up? Because now like I can't give that to her. Like I really, when she turned 18, that would be something I'd be like, if you ever want to like contact this person, like here's all this information you can and I'll support you. And I think that we've been in touch through the agency. I've sent emails through the agency, and they've sent it to the donor, and the donor has been like a bit more open to talk to us, like in 18 years, essentially. And I'm basically at the place where I'm like, I will do whatever if that's important to her, like I will move mountains to like get that done. Um, but we had to go in that direction because I I was only connecting to this through this one agency that had these certain types of donors that were from like where I'm from. And it was like the thing that got me over the line. I think I'm being vague on that. I'm happy to answer any more questions there, but um, at the time it felt like something, it would be okay. But if I had I wouldn't do it differently because it got me to where I am and it got me to her. But if I were to go back and get Andy and be able to contact the donor at 18, that would be my choice. Um, but I wouldn't like give it up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah. There's two ways to bring eggs into your family building journey. One of them is a live donor, and those agencies across. First of all, there's family and friends. You can go to your circle first. If that isn't an option, you can go to donor agencies in Canada. There's only one frozen egg bank in Canada, to my knowledge. Mostly we have donor agencies where there's, like live donors who are going to attend at a fertility clinic, undergo a retrieval for you with fresh eggs, make embryos, freeze those embryos, etc. Or the model in the United States is there's a number of egg banks in the United States. So you get frozen eggs, then you either you bring them to your clinic, you thaw those eggs, you make embryos, you freeze the embryos, and you go from there. So those are really the two avenues for bringing eggs into the project.
And quick question for you, Michelle, following up on what Emily just said. Is there a different legal aspect when people, intended parents, are working with international agencies?
Yeah. So when you're working with an egg bank, as M did, you will acquire frozen eggs. Okay. And so the donor, who knows when they underwent the retrieval and the eggs were sort of placed with the egg bank and where they're stored, you're not entering into an agreement with that donor. You're entering into an agreement with the egg bank or the agency through which you're getting those eggs. So there isn't a direct connection or a direct agreement with a donor the way we do it with a live donation in Canada. And that's really the main difference. In Canada, you're doing a OVA donation agreement between donor and intended parent or parents directly.
Thank you. Maybe a question for both of you, and we can start with you, Michelle. What advice would you give someone just starting on their egg donation journey?
To think about all of the buckets that you need to turn your mind to prior to making your embryos. So the emotional aspects. In Canada, we have counseling. It's called implications counseling. People sometimes refer to it as a psych assessment. It's not so much that. It's more like a counseling session where you speak to a social worker, a therapist, a psychologist about the implications of building your family through third-party reproduction, through egg donation. You can explore that. You need a minimum of one session, but you can have as many sessions as would be beneficial to you. So thinking about the emotional aspects, being fully informed on the medical piece, and obviously that's something that you'll cover with the fertility clinic, and then making sure that you fully cover the legal aspects, working with a lawyer who's a fertility lawyer who's well experienced in this area so that they know the way to navigate and guide you through the journey with touching on all of the elements that will keep you safe. So really touching on those buckets, and then arriving at your decision, making the embryos and moving forward with the transfer to conception.
Thank you, Michelle. Emma, again, what advice would you give someone starting their egg donation journey?
Uh, I want to come back to like I think it depends on how you enter it, but I'll say that there is no you're not going to wake up if you're entering it in a similar place to me, which is you've tried with your own eggs and you feel like it's time to try something new. I would say there's I think you're waiting for an emotion to pass and you're sort of being like, well, I need to grieve this or until I feel that um, or like I'm still not sure about it. So I'm gonna like wait this out. That like there's never a day you're gonna wake up. You kind of have to just make a decision that you just want to try something new and know that it's going to feel complicated. It's gonna feel like you're kind of in a push and pull with yourself, and that's like really, really normal in I think a donor journey. And to trust that um, a lot of these fears are not going to be there on the other side.
Mm.
Um, and to push through if it's something that you want or it's just the way that you need to build your family, like to just accept that you might just have bad feelings. It doesn't mean it's the wrong choice, though.
So you feel that maybe understanding that there is a before and an after, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
Um,
great way to put it.
yeah.
The before is very messy and not linear. And I think when you're doing IVF or intervention with your own eggs, um, you feel you're really moving towards this like dream. And I guess I'll say that like the dream that I had with my own eggs now it's the same dream. Like Andy, it's the same. It's I have gotten my happy ending. This is how it was meant to be. She's who she's meant to come in. Like I don't feel being on the other side. I don't feel like okay, I have her, but there's still this hole. I just don't I got it. It wasn't the way I wanted it to go, but the ending is as happy, if not more in a weird way, than I ever thought it could possibly be.
Um, what kind of resources did you find? I, I get that when you're on this journey, you need to educate yourself about what's going on. Did you find resources in a place that you would recommend to the people listening, or it was sharing where you were at? You mentioned a few times your community, like people
Mhm.
who've
Mhm.
been through it themselves with the third-party reproduction
Yeah.
and being open with sharing with you what they've been through and how they grew their family. Is there but this I get that this journey can be very lonely because
Mhm.
it's not so common to grow their families through third-party reproduction. So, and it's also a question for you, Michelle. Is there any place where resources could be found and to support people going through it?
Um,
Gosh, yeah, you go
Go ahead,
first. And
Michelle.
no, 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 you go first.
I think there's this like community in the UK, I mentioned, which Isabel, I can share it with you when I found it after. But like I found it hard because it's in the UK and it's not in Canada, and I do think it's nice to have a community where you're from. But if you are someone that's been listening to podcasts, connecting in with fertility friends, things like that, there are people that have talked about egg donation, and you kind of like I was just someone who would like DM and just be like, are you open to like a chat, or are you open to this? And honestly, you don't need that many. I had like, mm, I listen, I'm in a bit of a, okay, sorry, let me just take something back for a second. I'm a very open person, obviously. I have a podcast where I've talked about my entire journey. So for me, having people around me who would reach out when I decided on the podcast to share that this is what we're going to do, I had unbelievable people reach out that became friends of mine through the journey that I literally would text and call, like in like really panicking and anxious, and them calming me down and being like, keep going. It's going to be okay. And so I would just say that like you don't need it doesn't need to be this like big thing. If you can find one or two people that have gone through it that you can DM or you can message, and just you're okay to have them on your side. I think that that is huge. But Fertility Friends does a great job. I think like there's meetup groups. Like I had a meetup one time and I went to actually, um but nothing, unfortunately, I don't think there's anything that's like dedicated. Do you, Michelle?
I think you can piecemeal it together,
Yeah, yeah,
right? There's legal blogs. My website has a legal blog on it. I talk a lot about ova donation there and other, and embryo and sperm donation. You can piecemeal it together by podcast. There are fertility podcasts, online, I mean, even Facebook groups. There's groups of people who,
yeah.
gather independently and talk about this stuff and support a counselor, a fertility counselor to support the journey. Yeah, when I think about where are the resources, they're disparate. There's not one spot to go to really. Depends on what you need.
Well, there is this webinar, so
There's this webinar.
can be found on our YouTube channel starting tomorrow. Last questions, I think. I have one last question for each of you. And meanwhile, for the people listening, please ask questions. Oh, but actually, we just received a question. So let me see. Yep. So question for you, Em. What does family mean to you today?
Oh my God.
It's a very broad question.
I knew this question was coming, and now I don't know. I for me, family is so cliche. It's so cliche, but it's like it's it's love. Like it's just blanket. It doesn't have anything to do with your bloodline. It has like everything to do with love. And my family is my immediate family, but like my best friends are my family. Like I think I had to really redefine like what do I actually view? Like if you think about it, I don't know if like family for me is expansive. Like there are people that have siblings, parents that are blood related and they don't talk. You know what I mean? Like and people that like look at their friends, look at their aunts, look at their uncles as like their family. And so family for me is like people that show up for each other, that love each other like unconditionally, um, and like show a lot of respect. I don't view family as someone that has the same blood type as me.
Yeah. And what journey have you been on? From I don't think that you would have thought of saying something like that a year ago, over a year ago, because Andy's turned one.
Yeah.
So it's been yeah, it's
And I just
been
want to say one more thing. Andy is like my blood. I like I don't like I made her. Now, yes, I made her. I'm fortunate I was able to carry her. I think you can make a justification for, the fear on the surrogate side is that you don't carry the baby and that like the carrier of the baby is passing down their like they have impacts on like the development, right? That's the fear on that side. And then the fear, like so I would always say, like, I'd rather surrogate because then they would have my you can make an argue for there's women that have reached out that are doing an egg donor and a surrogate. And
Mhm.
like I just think that like whatever you narrative you tell yourself in this, that's the narrative you're gonna believe. So I just don't like I made Andy. I picked the donor. Like it was the most intentional thing I've ever done in my fertility journey to date. Like she is me. She is part of me. I like fed her. I'm the one that's been up with her. She knows my smell. Like so I think you gotta like loosen your grip on how tight you want to hold the blood conversation because the tighter you hold it, the harder you're going to make this feel for you. Because, like, seriously, if you pass me like a fresh baby that I know, like a adoption, which I also was not open to, let me just say, I was too scared for that. I would be like, now I would be like, I get it. I get it. Like, I am Andy's mom. She will call me mom. She calls nobody else that. So it's the relationship and the connection that I have with her earth side. I just needed to loosen my grip on like the how she was coming here.
Yeah, the what we touched on at the beginning of this conversation, the grief about the genetics
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
But when you go on the other side, when the day she was born, all of that disappeared for you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And Michelle, last question for you as well. But I think the last question that I wanted to ask you is how to be prepared. What does it mean, to be prepared when you go into egg donation? But we have questions from Nancy in the chat, and I think that answering her questions will answer more generally speaking how to get prepared for egg donation. So let me read that to you. For Michelle, I have
Sure.
a known donor, sister. Curious on timelines from a legal perspective. And then a follow-up question. Is there a requirement to connect with a lawyer and seek psychotherapy for a determined time before a contract can be signed?
Okay, so timelines, there's an order of events that it should happen in, but it doesn't always happen this way. Um, there's a requirement for your implications counseling. So it doesn't have to be a psychotherapist, it can be a social worker, it can be another type of counselor. But there is a requirement for counseling. Most people will say that the counseling should come first, that the party should talk about, their fears, their hopes, their dreams, how they envision this going, really sort through and work out those things. Then, where appropriate, move, carry on some of that conversation so that it's captured in the legal agreement. So I would say therapy first or counseling first, then the legal agreement comes next. And again, capturing some of those things that were discussed or working through them after the legal agreement. Of course, medical treatment. Only then your clinic will not undergo a retrieval of your donor until they have the legal clearance letter. In terms of timelines, I've seen it turn around a legal agreement in a week, maybe less, and I've seen it take months and months. It really depends on who's on the team, how motivated, what timeline are you working towards? Does anyone have sort of blackout periods where they're not able to participate in the process because they're away or they're traveling or they've gone, to a Zika virus zone or something like that. So it can be really short and really efficient, or it can be it can drag out, which can be really hard because you just by the time you get to the OVA donation agreement, you kind of want to get through it. So I always hope for an efficient process.
And the requirement to seek psychotherapy for determined time before a contract can be signed. Yeah, you answered that also with
Yeah, there's no sometime. I mean, I said that's the order of events that we'd like
yeah.
to see it in, so that by the time you get to the legals, you've had your implications counseling. Sometimes I'll speak to a donor and say, "How did your implications counseling go?" And the donor will say to me, "Oh, that's scheduled for next week." And I think, "Oh gosh, like here we are working on the legal agreement, but you haven't talked through some of the more difficult issues." And same with intended parents. Sometimes they get to me and they haven't done the implications counseling. Those are there's a sort of perfect order of events. It doesn't always work that way. I think for the most part, people arrive at the same place, which is they're moving forward with informed consent. Remember, informed consent includes three really important elements: full disclosure, so psychological disclosure, legal disclosure, medical disclosure, okay? A full understanding or capacity to understand, so whether it's a cognitive ability to understand or a lack of stressors that would prevent an understanding. So big life events shouldn't be happening at the same time. You really want to understand everything that's been disclosed and the implications. And then voluntariness, so coming to the OVA donation, whether you're a donor or intended parent, fully voluntary, okay, without duress, without being compelled. And that voluntariness doesn't just happen at one point in time. It has to be continuous until the medical treatment and embryos are created. So making sure that you have all of that informed consent. I think that happens. I know it happens. It should happen by the time the medical process happens. And sometimes it's not in the perfect order. And sometimes it's rushed and can be at the last minute. But as long as it takes place and everyone's satisfied that fully informed consent has been achieved.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I just looked at the time and it's past 9 already. I haven't seen this hour go by. Thank you to both of you. Maybe Michelle, would you like to share your contact information if people would like to contact you, have further questions on the legal aspects of egg donation?
For sure. I can be reached at Michelle, 2Ls, at flowerdaylaw.ca, or you can reach out to me on Instagram, Flower Day Fertility Law or Plaid Fertility Law. Plaid is my legal tech company. It's a web application where we instantly generate fertility agreement. So it's the process we use to put that agreement in place in a really streamlined and efficient way. So on Instagram under Plaid Fertility Law or Flower Day Fertility Law. Thanks so much, Isabel.
And Emily, same thing, because you mentioned that you shared your story already on your podcast. So maybe if you can tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, super easy. It's Day One, the number one, not ONE. So Day One Fertility, you can search it like wherever you get your podcasts and on Instagram and .com.
Thank you so much to both of you. A special thank you to Emily, because we know that it takes courage to talk about a lived experience on egg donation. So thank you very much for doing that with us tonight. And thank you, Michelle, for sharing your knowledge as brilliantly as usual. It's always a pleasure to have you on a webinar. I'd like to mention a few more things about FFF. The spring grant application platform closed a few weeks ago. The next time it will be open will be from October 1st to October 30, where you can apply for a grant if you are in need of financial support to continue or start your fertility treatments. You can always support our work by donating, making a donation through our website, www.fertilityfriendsfoundation.com. And you can also find on our website many information about our grants, our eligibility criteria, the news. There is always something going on at FFF, so check our website regularly and register to our e-newsletter. Follow us on Instagram, Fertility Friends Foundation. That's our account. And next webinar will be in June with Jennifer Fitzgerald, who is a naturopath from Conceive Health, and we're going to talk about fertility supplements. Thank you so much to both of you for being with us tonight. Thank you for all of you who were listening, and I'll see you soon. Have a good night. Thank you.